Well, here's history. My name's John. I'm going to tell you about the real world, reality. But not just about the world, about everything. I'm going to answer Morgan Freeman's questions. Some of his questions: is there life out there besides Earth? I suppose, where do we come from? And is there another dimension? Well, it's pretty simple answers. There certainly is another dimension on Earth. And in that dimension are all the things from space that are now on Earth, that are not in space. So don't bother looking in space for the aliens, because I'm afraid that all of the other dimension life forces are right here on Earth. And they're here for my benefit, because I'm quite special, you see. And I'm probably the most unlikely person that it would have been, but they kept telling you, our prophets, our three prophets, Moses, Jesus and Muhammad, that in the second millennium, of course, MM in Roman numerals, not Mickey Mouse. The year 2000, after the year 2000, that somebody would come, somebody who was very different. And it's me, the most unlikely person you could ever imagine. I'm going to answer your couple of questions, Morgan. And I'll start with the other dimension. Well, the other dimension is actually very important to mankind, because the other dimension is what one would call going to heaven. Because the other dimension is that the good people of the earth and the good people of other earths are here, but in another dimension, a dimension you can't see or understand. But fortunately I can, because they're here to protect me, because I'm afraid I'm going to have an awful lot of opposition to the fact that the person who it turned out to be, the one, is the most normal person you could ever meet. The person who can't be bought or bribed or anything, because he's only interested in one thing, which is humanity, the human race, but also our world around us, our environment, and the animals on which we rely so much upon. Now, that other dimension is here on Earth, but don't bother looking out into space for anything else, because there's no communication from anywhere else, because there is no other life anywhere else in the universe, only here on Earth. Because this is, as one would think of, the last resort. And the last resort really is the fact that this has been going on for an awful long time. And it's come to a conclusion. Now, on this occasion, this was the last chance. And if it hadn't have happened this time, there would never have been an existence at all of any type. I know that might seem strange, but you must understand that if it hadn't have happened this time, everything would have gone back into an infinite nothingness. So nothing would have ever existed. But as it happens, there is existence, and it's not just existence, there's hope. Because the year 2012, when they all thought it was going to end, is the year when it all begins. Because, boys and girls, I made it. I never did before. I never got to be 56, born in 56. And that was the criteria. If I could make it to my 56th birthday without humanity killing me off or treating me as badly that I did, then I would tell the world who I am. And I'm here. Now, I'll explain to you a little bit about man. We are certainly not derived from apes. You assume that we're derived from chimpanzees because we share 98.6% of our DNA. But actually, it's nothing to do with apes. We're a standalone product. There have been other attempts in the past at some form of humanity. There are ones which you will be recognised as Homo habilis, Homo erectus, and of course Neanderthal. But then, of course, genetically engineered 70,000 years ago, introduced into the Rift Valley in Africa, came Homo sapiens sapien, so good I named him twice. And here we are. We've dominated the earth in a very short period of time, and it's for a specific reason. in order for me to exist in any form of existence, there has to be a viable existence, and this is that viable existence. Now, unfortunately, on every other attempt, and there's been an awful lot, just count the stars in the skies, and it's always failed because of humanity's cruelty, particularly to me, and that was the one that was the criteria based around. So this time it didn't, and I'm unbelievably pleased to tell you all that this is the beginning of the rest of time, because it's never happened before. Now, okay, so I'm some fruitcake talking to the video on my own. Well, that's quite familiar to me, on my own. I've spent a huge amount of time on my own, even though I've got a large family. Because everybody's dismissed me, and I've never been able to sort of actually be at the point where I passed my 56th birthday, which incidentally was last Friday, a week ago. And now it's time to tell you that humanity isn't just safe, but it's in amazing condition, and we're going to prosper like you couldn't believe. Right, so the fruitcake will tell you a little bit more now about us. I'm going to tell you about Homo sapiens sapien very quickly, so that you'll understand where we came from. And I'll illustrate it to you of who I am by my incredible knowledge, which I couldn't possibly have. Now, I have with me some little friends of mine. I'm sure you can see them here. Oops, there we are. Now, these are apes. These are chimpanzees. This is a little statue. And these are three apes who are sat on some books. They're books of knowledge and law. Now, they illustrate two things to me. I know you know who they are. Hear no, see no, speak no evil. So I'm not a camera, am I? Now, but what's interesting about this little statue is that the fact that on the bottom of this statue, they're sat on a book. If you can see that very well, but it's a book. Bloody, I'm not a good photographer. Darwin is the book. And of course, we know Darwin for his book about evolution. And Darwin was quite right about evolution in the way it works. But what he wasn't fully aware of was the fact that the DNA that all animals and plants share is a common DNA. And the fact that we share this large DNA with chimpanzees doesn't mean we're derived from them. And the telltale little thing that's in these little statues is one thing, which I'll illustrate to you, is that at the bottom of the little animals, you will see they have what you think are, of course, feet. But of course, they're not feet. They're hands. Now, how you can tell they're hands, you see the little things poking from the side, they're what we call horizontally opposed thumbs. Now, our chimpanzee friends have got 4 arms. They've never had legs. Now, the way evolution works is that when DNA sequences, and every time DNA sequences, it always mutates, because there are submissive and dominant genes. And when you have submissive and dominant genes mating in every time DNA sequences and mates, there has to be differences. Now, those differences are mutations, and the mutations make evolution. Now, in the case of our chimpanzee friends, they are in the trees. They live in the trees, and they don't have legs at all. They never evolved with legs. They evolved with arms. They have 4 arms, no legs, because on their hands and their feet they've got horizontally opposed thumbs. Now, we are very different, that we've got horizontally opposed thumbs on our hands but not on our feet, and we are the only bipedal animal that is like that. There's also an awful lot of differences besides that. See, evolution, when it mutates, can only mutate to an advantage. And there is no advantage for an ape to evolve legs, because when you live in the canopy, there is no evolutionary advantage to having legs rather than 4 arms. We are a standalone product that was genetically engineered to make life extremely interesting and extremely viable for someone of a very different composition to exist in. Because you see, I've looked down upon Earth with huge jealousy, in a sense that I've always wanted existence to be so viable that I would want to give up everything I am to become some sort of species. And this is it. It was always humans, it was always Homo sapiens sapien in every case. As far as parallel universes are concerned, it's not parallel universes, they're parallel solar systems and parallel galaxies, but I'm afraid that all of those have run in a strange way, which is difficult to understand because they've been consecutive and concurrent at the same time, which is difficult to understand. But I have travelled throughout those situations in the form of this person. It's always John. And he could only be the one, the most unusual person, and the only viable person. Because however badly John was treated in every way, and he certainly has been in every way, he never gave up hope in any way. And that was the one person, if I was going to exist as a person, it would be the person who wanted love and life so much that it didn't matter what happened to him. It would be, and it is. Now, of course, there will be a book, and the book will have the same title on it as the contents, and it's just one word: love. That's the title of the book, and that's the contents of the book. You see, because that's the only thing I couldn't make. That's the only thing that was worthwhile. The thing you can't touch, hold, make. I'm afraid love is something that is beyond God. Because God is easy to make physical things, but I'm afraid in all the other existences and the parallel solar systems where Earths existed, in the same way they do with this Earth, they always ended badly because of humanity's cruelty. But this time, John was so resilient that it didn't matter how cruel people were to him. He never stopped loving man and mankind and animals and the Earth itself. And I think the Earth is absolutely wonderful. I've gone off the subject I was going to talk so much about, which is, of course, answering your questions. But I'll give you a couple of answers that are going to really put the spanner in the works, as they say. One is the moon landings, which, of course, you all wonder about. Well, the reality of the moon landings is, which is going to cause some embarrassment to the United States, but unfortunately that's the way life crumbles, is that there were no moon landings, ever. The only person who ever landed on the moon was Collins, who was in the orbiter that actually landed in the Sea of Tranquility on his own in a capsule which virtually crash landed with no fuel to take back off. And Armstrong, this hurts me to tell you, but that's how it is, and Buzz Aldrin, Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin, orbited around and around the moon while he crash landed in the Sea of Tranquility. He took a solid capsule and died there and then. He was granted the Medal of Congressional Medal of Honor by the American government. But of course Kennedy mouthed off in the early 60s that man would go to the moon and back. And then at the end of the 60s Nixon was in power, and Nixon decided that we had to tell the world in the Cold War that America was superior to stop the Cold War, which was very valid because we didn't want a war. We don't want a Cold War, we don't want a warm war or a hot war. So to take advantage, of course the Russians did exactly the same thing with silly things like nuclear planes, which were totally impossible. But there were 7 attempts at going to the moon and back according to the United States and NASA. But unfortunately none of them landed on the moon and took back off, because it's physically impossible, because you'd have had to take huge amounts of fuel to take back off from. There's lesser gravity on the moon to take back off. And if you look at the moon landings, I'm afraid that they become farcical, because they start off with the original moon landing where Collins is in the fated capsule which crash lands, and within a short period of time, between 1969 and 1972, there's tremendous colour cameras and a sort of moon rover, Range Rover without a body, driving round. Well, I'm afraid, America, you went a little bit too far with that. And you let one man die for the sake of his country, which I can understand, as an awful lot of people do. Armed forces all over the world do. But that's the truth about the moon landings. It was staged on a Nevada sound stage, and it was filmed, and there have been no successful moon landings with anybody taken off. Just one man dying for his country. Now, another subject I want to talk about is JC, Jesus Christ. You all wondered what had happened to him in the lost years, the lost 14 sort of years. There's no recorded history. Well, of course, Christ was on the run from the Romans. He'd upset them with his preachings of good things, where the Romans were only interested in military force. And he came somewhere special. And you all wondered where it was, where he spent those lost years. And it was right here, in South Wales. And he travelled up through Europe, and he came across the Channel, and 2,000 years ago, Christ came to a sleepy little hamlet where there were very few people, just some fishermen. And it was on the banks of a river. Of course, he was very familiar with that sort of thing. And he became a fisherman. For all those years, he carried on his preaching. And he camped on the banks of a river, the River Wye. And he camped right by the river, in a very special place. And actually, it's my garden, where I now currently live. And that's the Garden of Eden, because that's where Christ spent his time. Now, the Romans, of course, found out where he was, in a sense, and tried to invade Britain, but didn't invade Britain for some years. Well, not long after. And right behind me, there's a place called Caerleon, and it has the Roman Fortifica. You will find out that the Roman Fortifica is the largest fortress ever built and settlement by Rome, by the Romans, in the world ever. And it was for a specific reason, of course. Christ had come here to Newport. And Caerleon is just over the hill in Newport, in Caerleon. And he had spread his word. And they wondered what would happen. And they used huge force to subdue everything. There's no recorded history about any of it, of course. But we do have a song. Did those feet in ancient time walk upon England's glory green? Well, the correct words were sung at Will's and Kate's wedding. Did those feet in ancient time walk upon England's mountains green? Well, I'm afraid that in southern England there are no mountains. But of course the mountains start right here in Wales. And it's the Welsh Mountains, of course. He lived at the foothill of the Welsh Mountains, which were virtually uninhabited 2,000 years ago. And this sleepy town of Newport became totally unknown in every way throughout history. But it's certainly going to be known now about history. Right, hang on.